But I knew where I was going. I knew, sitting in those meetings with the CEOs and watching things get done and seeing them get hope and help was so beautiful. I could not do this. So I think even in the darkest, most challenging moments, knowing my purpose, knowing this is exactly where I'm supposed to be, how do you hang that up?
Welcome to Through the Dip, the show where we chat with entrepreneurs and learn what it takes to navigate your business through the dip. Not just the lessons about business, but the lessons that change your lives and the relationships around you. My name is Steven Souter, but before we get into today's episode, this show is brought to you by HustleFish, a digital marketing agency that helps you get unstuck and moving forward. If you have big marketing questions and don't know how to resonate with your potential customers, go to throughthedip.com/marketing for a free marketing audit. On today's episode, how Robert Hunt pivoted from a successful corporate career into leading CEO peer groups, where he gets to roll up his sleeves every day and help people figure out some of the toughest business challenges, but also how to live their life. Now, this road wasn't easy. When Robert first pivoted, he started losing money year after year, racking up more and more debt as he was trying to build a successful CEO roundtable. As he started falling farther and farther behind, he started feeling more and more stuck. Until one day he realized that he needed to step up and take real ownership of his life. He was the one that created the problem, and he was the one that could also fix it. So he sold his dream home and moved his entire family into a small little apartment so he could start from the ground up and build his business into what it is today, an amazing, thriving, successful CEO roundtable based in Dallas, Texas. Now, Robert took these lessons he learned and wrote an amazing book called Nobody Cares Until You Do, which is all about living beyond the blame, excuses, and doubt that is holding you back. How did you make the progression from like the corporate world to doing peer group CEO coaching, accountability?
Yeah, it seems like a big jump, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It really wasn't that big of a jump because I learned what my personal purpose was just a few years before that. And when I was talking with the guy who had bought the franchise rights to the peer groups in Dallas, and he's telling me what they do, I'm like, so people pay you to help them and to care for them? Well, that's me, man. That's what I want to do my whole life. And I just knew I had to go do that. There was no other option. I had heard about peer groups before, but I really didn't know what their value was. Like I worked for a company in California where the guy's part of a peer group, and he'd come back and tell me all these great things he was going to do and then never did any of it. So that peer groups are just a joke. But when I heard the way this is supposed to be structured and what it's like, I thought I could do that. And so I was, 50 when I decided to change careers, and I'm in a new state. I'd moved here in 2 years before then. I didn't know anybody in Texas really, but I knew that was me. That's my calling. That's my purpose. And to be able to have a job where you live out your purpose every day, It's wicked awesome.
How did you find that purpose? Like what was the realization of that moment where you're like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing?
I read a book called Dare to Serve Leadership by Cheryl Batchelder. She was the CEO of Popeye's Chicken. And in the back part of the book, helps you understand your personal purpose in life. And I got it from that book, and I created it after reading that book. I followed step by step of what she would do with her employees to teach them how to live out their purpose. So I did mine, and I came up with it through that. So I knew it was there, and I'm like, well, now what do I do? And so now moving to Texas, I'm like, well, maybe I'll find my purpose here. And I did.
Was it hard to figure that out, what that purpose was? Or did it come pretty naturally? Like, did you sit and wrestle with it for a long time?
No, the book is pretty clear on how to get it done. I think I'd always kind of felt I knew what my purpose was, but I didn't have any clarity I didn't have enough clarity of what that really looked like. Like I'd always been the guy at a company when I was a marketing guy all my career, marketing and sales. I'd always be the guy trying to get us to play nice with each other and to get along and to try and do things together as a company. And I worked for companies that the owners were kind of odd people. And so I never could be that unifying force I wanted to be, but I wanted to be. Well, that's part of my purpose is I could see it, I could feel it, but I didn't know how to articulate it. So when I took the process of defining it through that book, then it all came clear. And then it was an affirmation of what I'd been wanting to do all along.
And did you just quit your job to start pursuing this new found purpose?
No, I had decided that I was I needed to be more intentional about my life, and I decided to move from California to Texas because I just felt like California was so broken, still is, and I needed to get out. And so going to Texas was a fresh start for me where I could start all over again. And I came here with the idea of doing marketing consulting, but I was going to do it my way. I was going to be very strategic in nature. I don't need to make someone's website or their brochure. I need to help them figure out, how do you align everything in your business around marketing? And most people don't do that. They just go, I need a trade show booth. And I really wanted to be that strategic guy, but nobody would hire me. Nobody gets that idea. Marketing is a function to them. It's an expense. And it's not something that they invest in. And they don't have as part of their corporate strategy. It's just a thing. And so I couldn't get anyone to hire me. So I was getting more frustrated with that. And I'm not living on my purpose. I'm not making good money. I got to do something else. And I think that God was stirring in my heart to get ready to go change and do something else.
How do you fall into this peer group?
Well, I met the guy. He somehow found me and said, hey, I want to talk to you about doing marketing for me. And I met him, and as he's telling me about the peer groups, I'm like, oh yeah, you can't afford me because you're not going to pay me for this. You don't have a budget for this. But I really want to do what you're doing. This is me. This is who I am. So he was looking for people to run the groups. And I didn't want to spend all my time recruiting people. He was going to find people, set up groups, and I was going to run them.
Nice.
And that to me was letting me do what I really like doing, which is working with people, helping people, but not selling.
Yeah.
Because I never considered myself a good salesperson. I was a farmer. When I had sales accounts, I had a territory. I had the same 8 customers for 15 years.
Wow.
So, there's not a lot of hunting at that point. I'm taking them golfing and renegotiating contracts once a year, Yeah. And so when I started feeling the pressure of having to go out and find business and hunt for it, I wasn't digging it. And so the vision of him doing all the work and me just running the groups sounded great. And we were going to split the revenue. So I said, yeah, I'm in. And then I signed up in December and got trained in January and spent a whole year trying to figure out how to do it.
Nice. And so to just take off and start?
No, it was horrible. Like the first year, I think in July of that year, I had a dry run with one of my clients who is still a group member today, 11 years later, and then 3 other people. And it was, I'm sure it was horrible. They trained me for 2 days. And then the first day was how to sell. And the second day was supposedly how to run the group meetings and facilitate. And I was not qualified. So it was a really tough learning curve. So July was a dry run, and I spent the whole rest of the year going about trying to get groups going. And by December, we had those same 4 people. And I'm like, look, we got to get started, Yeah. What was interesting is it's a great reminder that whatever you're going to do, you got to do it with all your heart. Because I remember going in to do pitches for people for marketing because I wasn't making any money in the peer groups is still starting out. So I hear about a thing for marketing. I go in and I start pitching the marketing, and I was realizing this guy doesn't understand marketing and he's not going to pay me to do strategy. So you want to be in a peer group? He was totally changing, not the right way to approach a moment. And I realized I cannot do both. I cannot continue to have one foot in marketing, one foot in peer groups. I got to be all in. And I don't know, a lot of people tell me, I got a side job and I do this now. How does that not distract you? I mean, when your salary, they own your soul, right? You don't work 9 to 5. You work till the job is done. That's what salary means, at least in my mind. Yeah. And so to then have another gig on the side meant that I'd look at my emails in the middle of the day, or I'd take a phone call during a lunch break, whatever. I can imagine doing that because I have a hard enough time just being focused on what I want to get done, let alone the other things that are calling me. And it also makes you look at everything you are doing with disdain. Like, this isn't fun. I want to go do that. Yeah. And so now you treat that job with disrespect. So I've never been able to be someone who had a side gig. And that was apparent as I was starting that first year. I need to be all in. So by the end of the year, I'm like, look, I'm not going to take any more marketing projects because that was making me cash and I needed money to live on. And I won't do it anymore. And so by the end of the year, I committed, I'm all in, burn the ships. Wow. This is it. So that meant year 2, I took out of my savings account. Then I took out of my retirement account. And I ate up all my retirement, all my investments, all my everything. And then by year 4, we starting to owe money. So that's kind of the journey of then getting into debt because we still kept living like I had a job that paid me all this money when I did not. And that led us to that place where we got heavy in debt. Yeah.
So it sounds like you were optimistic at the beginning, and so taking out money or whatever wasn't as scary because you're like, oh, this is all going to work out.
It's part of starting a business, right?
Yeah. It's at what point does that optimism start fading? You're like, oh shoot,
I
there's a
think when the
problem.
stress of the debt overweighed the optimism, I really do know that this is my purpose in life. I'm living out my purpose. I will do this until I'm dead. I love doing what I'm doing. I had no doubt that this is where God called me to go and be, but he didn't say, and just keep partying like you're a millionaire. He didn't add that part. That was my part. He was clearly calling me into this role, but you got to live where you are. And there's a season for all kinds of things. And my CEOs that I work with, they've had to mortgage their homes. They've had to defer things. They've had to sell things to survive, to keep payroll going. So they know what it's like to give up and to sacrifice. But you still got to be responsible. You just can't write checks you can't cash. And so that mindset of overload in our finances had such a ripple effect on my emotions. Yeah. So much stress and anxiety. Every day I think if I work my butt off all day long, I'm still screwed. I still owe all this money. Yeah. I'll never get ahead. And then after a while I gave up. I stopped even looking at the bills. I remember not getting paid $9,000 one year because I forgot to bill a client.
Wow.
Because I wasn't paying attention to the finance side of the business. And bills would come in, I wouldn't even read them. I would just pay them, assuming they were accurate. And on occasion, they were not accurate, but I just paid it. And then I'd go back at the end of the year going, what was that for? Because I'd do my taxes, I had to figure out the deductions. I go, I don't even know what that is. And all this money was going up, but I wasn't looking at it because I refused to pay attention because it was so ugly. I didn't want to look at it. Yeah. Can you imagine that level of irresponsibility? There's probably someone out there right now that's just doing that exact same thing.
Yeah, well, like when you're in a bad spot, like looking at bad numbers day in, day out, week over week, like that's so demoralizing. It's easier sometimes just to ignore it, which makes the problem worse. But
it does. It does. That you're burying your head in the sand does not make it get better.
Oh, that it would. What is the economics of a peer group look like? Like how are you making money? Like I'm not very familiar with the economics of peer group.
Yeah, people pay money to be a member. So there's a monthly fee that goes into it. And there's really very little overhead. I pay a royalty to the franchise I'm a part of, and the rest of it's mine. And then, you have meeting space and meals and the cost to go run the business, to go take someone to lunch to get to know them, or to do sales pitches or campaigns or whatever, marketing and stuff like that. But it's relatively low. And so it's good margins. And people stay in peer groups forever. Steven's been in our group for 11 years since I started the group. Ben's been in 10 years. Salem, who co-authored the book with me, and all the other people that are in that same time frame, they've been in 6 years. So the average time that someone's in a peer group is about 5 years. Mm-hmm. And the cool part is, we become friends. We become close to each other. We know each other's spouses, and we know about their kids, and we've cried together and cared for each other. And you don't want to leave that, It's like breaking up with your girlfriend, And so it's a long running play. It's hard to get someone to commit. That's probably again, that's an excuse right there. I caught myself. That's an excuse to say it's a long sale. People who are struggling in sales say it's a long sale. No, it's not. It's long for you. Other people are closing it the first time they meet the person. So it's really what you're doing. Yeah. But you have to look hard to find someone who will be really transparent and vulnerable. Peer groups require vulnerability if you're really going to get the benefit of it. You could be in a peer group forever and just go there and tell everyone how great you are and how smart you are and successful you are and never change. But if you really want to get help, you got to be honest and say, I have no idea what I'm doing. Yeah. And I need help, and I'm burned out, and I'm frustrated, and I'm worried. I don't think I'll make payroll this month, and I have a problem. And then everyone who knows you, loves you, and has walked with you can go, well, what are we doing here? What did you do this? And they ask you questions and questions. And the goal of it is for you to self-discover, because when you self-discover, you own it more than anyone else telling you what to do. Yeah. But people stay in these groups forever because they find real value.
What were your revenue goals with peer groups when you first started out?
Yeah, I was $1 million a year. I remember, thinking, look, I can do this. This is easy for me. This is who I am. It should be a cakewalk. And of course, the people who enroll you say, this is great. It's just math, boom, boom, boom. Here's all the money you're going to make. And, mathematically, it's so easy. So I really did envision, making $1 million the first year. Not even close. Wow. Yeah. There's plenty of people out there. One of my challenges is that I really required that they not be jerks. Because I went and visited a couple of peer groups, and I looked around and I'm like, that guy's full of himself. Why? That guy's rude. And I didn't want people who are mean.
Yeah.
So it's really hard. I'm very, very picky for the people who come into our groups. I've heard our group members say many, many times, not how great I am, but what a great job I do in choosing people for our groups. They're not looking for me to tell them anything. And that's not the role of a coach anyway. But they love to be in the room with the other people because they are walking the journey that they are.
Yeah.
And so they've always said, you do a great job finding great group members, but it's slow. I mean, if I had 2 people a year, I'm thinking that's pretty good.
Wow.
Because I have to meet a lot of people to be able to find ones who are willing to be really, really open. And then you got to get them over that hump of just, are you willing to commit? It's a commitment of money and time. We meet every month. It's 6 hours a day. It's a lot. Wow. And I can't take a day away from my job to go work. How sad. How sad. It's your own company and you can't take a day away to go invest in yourself to be a better leader. That says a lot right there. When people, they think they're dismissing me by telling, I'm really busy. Oh, isn't that sad? Yeah. Don't you own this company? Isn't this your company? Why are you the hardest working person here? And if you divide it by the number of hours you work compared to the pay you get, you're the lowest paid employee on top of that. So you're not making any money and you're working your butt off. Wait, this is your company. Didn't you start it to have all the freedom and all this kind of stuff that you're going to have with a peer group or with the business you started? So I think having that kind of person who's really willing to be really, really real and to commit to other people, it's hard to find those people.
Yeah. As you're growing the peer group and you have this amazing goal of doing $1 million and you're not hitting that goal and the stress is building up, like what is that like? What is it like and how did you manage that stress?
Yeah. As I'm looking through the dip, right? As I'm looking through, I think again, it comes back to my quest. I knew why I was doing this. And there were many times where my wife would say, why don't you go back and get a marketing job? And I'd say, geez, do you remember how often I would get laid off as a marketing person? Like every 3 years I'd get let go from my company as a marketing person because they're either making plenty of money and they figure out they just job it out to something else, or they're not making enough money and they cut the expensive people. Yeah. Marketing is not an investment, it's expense. And so every 3 or 4 years, I seem to be losing my job as a marketing guy. So what security am I going to have if I go back to marketing? But I knew where I was going. I knew, just sitting in those meetings with the CEOs and watching things get done and seeing them get hope and help was so beautiful. I could not do this. So I think even in the darkest, most challenging moments, knowing my purpose, knowing this is exactly where I'm supposed to be, how do you hang that up? So it just kept me going. I think I have an amazing wife who truly loves and supports me and believes that God has created me to do this. I don't know a lot of other wives who would put up with what we went through. She's always super supportive. But those were some down days. Those were some real hard times. But I just had to come back and go, what else will I do? Yeah, this is who I'm supposed to be. I could go make money. I mean, really, if it was all about money, I'd go be a real estate agent. I'd be great as a real estate agent. Showing houses, doing research, connecting with people, networking, taking them on tours, working nights and Saturdays, and then not being around my kids when they have soccer games. I could do all that, but that's not my structure. I want to be home when my kid comes home from school. I want to be able to be there at their soccer events. I want to be able to hang out and have a beer with a friend once in a while and enjoy life and settle down. I don't want to spend my nights and weekends working. Yeah. So to me, it was, no offense to real estate people who are listening to this podcast, it just wasn't my fit. And I had to stay focused on where I was going when it was really hard.
Do you feel like you had that freedom though when it was really hard?
What we failed to do is change our lifestyle. Because if you make less money, what are your options? Make more or spend less, right? And we didn't want to spend less. And so part of my guilt trip as a provider was that, well, you're not doing a very good job providing for your family, so don't make them suffer. Let's just keep spending, which was probably just more BS in my own head. My wife wasn't going, how come we don't go to the Riviera this year? She never complained once. But in my own insecurities, I felt like, well, I shouldn't make them suffer just because my business is struggling. Yeah, you should. Talk to the CEOs in our peer groups. Their families went without many times. They cut back to the bone many times and mortgaged their homes and did these things that they had to do to survive. They sacrificed. They reeled it in. So it was just arrogance on my part, a lot of pride that didn't allow me to make or didn't help me make the right decision.
So you have this debt that's building up and sales isn't increasing the way that to get you out of this debt. How did you start resolving that
Yeah,
issue?
it got really ugly in 2019. We got up to $90,000 in debt at the beginning of 2019, and we had had our annual planning meeting. My wife and I, we used to go away when money was better. We'd go somewhere like Colorado and stay at a house and have a couple of days of visioning and planning and say, what do we want to do this year? And this year we didn't have any money, so we did it in our home office and whiteboarded it. And we wrote everything down, and we just said, what do we want our lives to look like? What are we chasing? And it came down at the heart of it was we wanted to please the Lord with our lives. That was a really big deal to us. And because we were where we were, all we did was whine and complain to God, like, hey, help us out. Kathy would use the term, when is God going to bless us? And I'd say, I am blessed. I'm married to you. Our kids are healthy. We live in Texas. I have a business I love. We're just not making any money. So can you be blessed and not make money? Yeah. Because you don't get to determine what blessing looks like. God determines what that is. So it was January 2019, and we whiteboarded out. We said, okay, we got to change our attitude. So let's make a decision. If by the end of this year, if we haven't paid the house off, we're going to sell it and start over. And that was a pretty serious moment. But we just thought, well, we have money there. It's sitting there. We could do it. That would suck, but we could do it. And so all year long, we're like, okay, God, here you go. Here's your chance. Come through, drop a big bag of money in the backyard. And I kept thinking of all these creative ways of somehow getting out of this problem, taking on weird loans, asking people to help us, whatever. And it just was kicking it down the line a little further, a little further. In September of that year, I got vertigo for 16 days, and I was sick all the time. I couldn't sleep, couldn't sit up, couldn't work. It was debilitating.
Because of the stress?
Well, I think so. We went to a chiropractor. We went to an ear doctor. We went to my regular doctor. No one could figure out why I had it. And they did all these things where they flip you upside down on a chiropractor table and try and it just makes you puke. It's really a weird thing. But after 16 days, God took it away, and I said, hey, man, that's a wake-up call. That's a hey, stop waiting call. And it was then we decided, okay, we're going to do it. So we contacted the real estate agent, asked him to come by, take a look at the house, put it up for sale, started working on a plan to get out of debt by selling the house, taking all the equity out of it. We figured the math, after he gets his cut, we would be able to pay everything off to the penny. And so started the process of doing that. It didn't sell during the Christmas season, so we took it off and put it back up in February. And by March, we had closed and found a rental place. It's a little tiny house, not too far from our old house, and couldn't take any of the furniture with us because it was too big for the rental we were going to. So we had to give it away or sell it all.
Wow.
And then started over with beds, dressers, some folding chairs, and a TV. And then we did it. So it was hard, but the freedom and the joy and the peace that comes from owning your junk is amazing. I remember in April, we paid all these companies off to the dime, still had $500 left over, but you couldn't buy anything because everything was closed. COVID shut down the world. You couldn't even get like Amazon to deliver stuff or, furniture stuff. But I remember one morning sitting in the living room and having time with the Lord and just being still. And I had this wicked feeling I hadn't had in the longest time. It was peace. And I forgot what peace felt like because bit by bit, I had moved away from peace by the choices I made in my life over the past 5 or 6 years, bit by bit, further into debt, further angry at God, further blaming the world, further saying I can't fix this, and getting more and more to not the person I am. And the fear and the anxiety that haunted me every day, I didn't notice how much was there until it was gone. And then by contrast, I look back and go, wow, I can't believe how much stress I lived under. And this is why we push this book. There's a lot of people out there living under a life of stress, worry, fear, hopelessness. You don't have to.
Yeah.
All you got to do is own it. And when you own it, you gain the power to do something about it. The longer I kept thinking, well, when the economy comes around and when the franchise figures out how to do this, or when God is helpful to us, this will all be good. But it was my junk. It was my problem. It was my issue. And when I finally took accountability for it, and when I owned it, and I said, okay, that's it, we're doing this, then I had power. I made decisions, and I fixed it. And it was hard and it sucked, but it also sucked to live as a victim for all those years and to be stressed and worry and have anxiety. So you're trading one suck for a different suck.
Yeah.
This other suck was temporary. It was like 6 months and then I was free. Whereas I'd been a victim for years and just felt like I'd never get out of it. And then when we had that done, we started looking around the rest of our lives and going, well, what else do we not like? We need to go to a marriage counselor and talk through some of the junk we've gone through in the last few years. And how do we let ourselves get into this kind of debt so we don't do it again? We had a financial advisor who looked at our bills and helped us do a budget and said, this is how money is spent, really like we were children. But we needed that. We had a mental block towards it. I looked at my health. I'd got really fat. I was 265. I'd never been that fat. And, if you're not making money, you might as well drink bourbon. Seemed like a good fix.
Yeah.
And then just all my habits, I started looking at everything, relationships and my kids and really saying, is that the vision of the life I want? Is that how I want it to be? No? Well, then what are you going to do about it? And I felt like I had the power to do anything because we conquered the biggest thing we had going and we kicked his butt.
Wow.
And so now we're thinking, well, raising kids ought to be easy now. Having a business ought to be easy now compared to this, right?
Yeah.
So it's very freeing. It's very invigorating to just see that I can change all these things.
How do you move through that with a spouse? Because I think like hearing you talk about accountability, there's one thing taking about like accountability just for yourself, but you're moving through this with somebody else.
Yeah. I got to give all the credit to my beautiful wife, Kathy. She's amazing. And she is a godly woman who believes in me and supports me. And we have always been friends. And she is my best friend. And I don't know many guys whose wives would be like, sell the house? Okay, sure. But that was her attitude. It was like, okay. I think because she believes in me and I think she knows that I'm doing the best for our family, she supported it. It was hard. My wife finds her identity a lot in her home. I do not. I find my identity in the garage. And I still got to have a garage when I moved to the next place. But Kathy had to give up the entertaining that we like to do so much and the opportunity for those family times where all the relatives come over and we have a dining room table enough for 18 people to sit around it and have a Thanksgiving dinner. This new place didn't have all that. But because she believes in me and because we're doing this together, now I didn't just come home and say, here's the plan, I'm doing this. We had prayed about it for a year. I mean, started in January, we walked through this. There were many nights where we just on our knees before God. And I just remember some of those days in that year where God really spoke clearly to me and it reminded me he's there for me. He's got a plan, really intimate moments with the Lord that teed me up for that day where I got the vertigo and decided, okay, we gotta pull the trigger. And he equipped us for that, for where we were going to go. So yeah, I think having a spouse that you align with, that you're on the same page with is essential for pretty much every decision in life, but certainly was for this one.
Yeah. As you're talking about selling the house and getting rid of the debt, you were mentioning the word accountability a lot. Is accountability like a key part of moving from where you were and feeling stuck to becoming unstuck?
I don't think I thought about it, that it was accountability at the time. I did not see any awareness of the idea of accountability in that journey. We were just living out what it means to be accountable. We would no longer blame. We would no longer make excuses. We would no longer say, I can't. And we certainly were not going to wait and hope one day longer. We were going to own it because nobody cares until you do.
Yeah.
And when we cared enough to change our own lives, we fixed it. But up until then, it was always something else happening to us, something else we could blame. And it just kept us frozen as a victim.
What does that mean? The title of the book, Nobody Cares Unless You Do.
Yeah, the basic heartbeat of it is that's that turning point in your life when you're done making excuses as a victim or blaming others or saying you can't or waiting and hoping. And you say to yourself, wait, nobody cares until you do. And then you can do something about it. And that's the second half of the book, the freedom that comes from declaring, I'm not going to let this be the way I live my life. Mm-hmm. A lot of the original use of that phrase came from me telling my son, James, when he'd come to me as a young man, starting to figure out how to own stuff in his own journey, and he'd blame his teachers and he'd blame his coach and he'd blame kids at school. And I'd say, James, wait, nobody cares. Your boss is not going to care that traffic was bad. They're just going to care you showed up late for work. Your wife's not going to care that you lost your job. Whether you have a bad boss or not, she's not going to care. She's going to care you don't have a job now. And so you have to stop looking at ways to blame and make excuses. You have to start owning this. So this was part of our conversation a lot in the years that led up to 2019 as I watched my young son move up to be a man and how the challenges of that growing where you stop looking at something as a victim mindset. So that combination of the journey of raising him and using that phrase a lot, and this reality that, we've got to have a book that gets people attention and says, hey man, you want to be a victim? Nobody cares.
Yeah.
But if you don't like being a victim, there's a way out.
What's the difference between responsibility and accountability?
I dig this topic because this is really crystal in my mind these days. Responsibility is doing something. Accountability is owning the outcome. And so when you have employees, they show up at the work, they do something, they're being responsible. You're giving them a paycheck. They showed up, done, we're even. But accountable is going, well, now what should you do while you're here? How should you behave? How should you talk? How should you think? Should you look around and go, I have a little free time. Why don't I help that guy? Hey, that's wrong. I know that's going to be a problem. Why don't I call and tell them? Hey, a customer's at the door. No one's here. Why don't I jump up and help them? The way we behave, the things we do while we're in those roles, that moves it from just doing something to doing the thing. A lot of people will talk about ownership mentality. Don't you wish your employees had ownership mentality? Well, the way to create ownership mentality is to create a culture of accountability where I think beyond just the thing I'm supposed to do. I'm in accounting. I do accounting. Case closed. But, I noticed that the onboarding process is really lame. And that when people come in, they need to have a credit card. They need to give them all their stuff to get their I-9s, all this stuff. But there's also a lot about onboarding and our culture and our values. Why don't I just create an onboarding program? Well, that's HR's job, but they're busy and they haven't done it in 2 years. Why don't I just help them? Well, they might get mad. Well, talk to them. But this is where you step up and say, I'm not just going to do a thing. I'm going to do the thing where I can bring the most value. The other side of that is I see business owners who say, I'm responsible for everyone in my company. No, you're not. At best, you're going to get the blame for it, maybe. Is that what you're saying? You get the blame. So some guy is supposed to take care of a customer and the customer calls up and they're rude and horrible and they don't do it right and the customer's mad and we lose a customer. Okay, I'll take the responsibility for that. I'm responsible. But it still happened. Now, accountable would mean that look, I have 15 employees in the customer service department. Have I trained them properly? Do they have real good documentation that tells them how to behave? Do they understand the reason behind the why of how we do things here? That's accountable. You're creating the result you want by the effort you put into it. And so doing something or doing the right thing is the biggest difference between responsible and accountable.
What are the steps to get to a place where you are more accountable for your life? Like if I'm stuck right now in blaming other things, or it's just like, this isn't fair, life isn't fair, maybe unfair things have actually happened to me. Yeah. Like how do I start moving through life or these situations so that I start feeling empowered and in control of things versus this feeling of powerless?
So the first thing is just become aware of the accountability that is expected of you as a human in where you are. We talk about it in the book that at the beginning, you're not even aware of what kind of accountability is there. What mountain? And when you finally realize the level of accountability, then you can start the journey. So one of the ways you help to acknowledge where you're at is to take the satisfaction assessment. It's in the book, but it's also online. And we do it in a way that people can get it for free because we don't want to charge them and prohibit them from doing it. We don't even ask for their data. Just fill it out, take a screenshot, export the PDF, whatever you want. So when you declare honestly, really, really honest to yourself, what your life is like, then you can take an assessment and go, okay, so why am I unhappy with all this stuff? Why do I think my marriage is a 2? Why is my health a 4? Why is my sales team a 5? And when you are honest about it, then you'll start to see, well, wait, I'm making an excuse. Oh, I'm blaming that person. Oh, I'm saying I can't do anything about that. Or I'm just waiting and hoping. You can see those things that we do in all these areas that keep us stuck where we are. But I don't want to be stuck. I want to go there. I want to chase the life that I really want. So now you've declared where you're at. You've said why you're not happy. And if you create a vision of where you're going to go and you stop and you say, look, nobody cares, and I'm going to own this, then you make a plan. You acknowledge the reality of where you're at. You embrace the suck. You find a solution, and then you make it happen. That's the journey that we went through with our home. And it's the journey we go through everything now. In running our business, if business goes down, we just stop spending money. Kathy and I have paid off all of our debt, but we have one car that we share because business is not where I'd like it to be to justify a second car. because we got to make up all those years we ate up that retirement fund. There's no future.
Yeah.
And so we're making sacrifices today. Now they're irresponsible to say, well, you deserve a car. You both deserve a car. It's America. Everyone should have their own car, right? And yet we don't deserve it because I don't have a future secured away. So I don't have to tap into my kids' money when I can't work anymore someday. And so we're making the responsible decision of what we're going to do for the future by having one car. And that sucks sometimes, but that's okay. We're living better than most of the world who spends the day looking for water or food or trying to avoid to get murdered or destroyed by another nation. We've got it pretty easy in America. So I think this is where you decide what you want your life to look like and go chase that. But it really does start by acknowledging where you are.
You've brought up Kathy quite a bit and moving through this whole business journey with her. How do you keep her in the loop with what's going on? Like if you're both making sacrifices, like one car, like does she know what revenue needs to get to like get a second car, or like how do you get on the same page with
It's really how much she's willing to put up with, because we have the money now, we could do it. Mm-hmm. But I say, look, every time we have a car, it's going to be a car payment. It's going to be insurance that goes up. It's going to be maintenance. It's going to be tolls. It's going to be gas. So if we don't spend that money on it, let's put that money in an account, and then let's save for our future, and let's take a few thousand out in the spring and go on a vacation somewhere. Let's enjoy it. But does the car have to be the thing that makes our life better? Going without a car for a few years, we proved we don't have to have one. So as long as she's cool with not having one, we'll keep doing it. But we do talk about, we review our finances every week. On Friday, we go through our QuickBooks and our Quicken and look at where our money is being spent and go, oh, we should pull this back a little bit. Or, hey, let's see if we can throw another $100 in this savings account next month. And, we do it together. And she knows the vision of the business. She is my business partner. We work together. But she is able to go and do other things and enjoy her life. And so I tap into her when I need her help. But we're making all these decisions together. And I think it's good, healthy communication that makes that possible.
Looking back at my future self, there's like business decisions that I made where like you're still paying the consequences of those decisions. Yeah. Like you've taken a loan or you invest in something that didn't pan out. And maybe there was good reasons or bad reasons. But for me, it's hard not to look back at that past self and be mad at that person, being like, why'd you get yourself in the situation that you're in now? Is that hard for you at all? Like to give that old person the grace to say,
I really don't look backwards at that. I know I'm not a good businessman. I didn't want to be a businessman. I'm a marketing dude. And I ended up owning my own business because the guy I was going to work for quit. I didn't ever want to own my own business. It was never a passion of mine. So I was never equipped or mentally into the whole thing. I like working for other people. They take the problems home, not me. But like most people, don't we learn the hard way?
Yeah.
My mom always said that the view from the top of the mountain is beautiful, but the fruit grows in the valley. And when I'm in my worst times in the valley, I learn. And so I don't know that I would have learned if everything went easy. I've never learned that way. Wise people who loved me would always say, well, here's a good thing to do. And I'd be like, okay, thanks. And I'd go do my own thing and I'd have to eat it, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of been the way I roll so far. I don't recommend it. I recommend that you listen to people and consider their wisdom and adjust accordingly. But no, I don't live with the regret of that. I think it's because I realized that I just don't know what I'm doing. And I have to be okay with that. The smartest group members in my group still don't know what they're doing. They still, because you can't know everything. I've got some brilliant people. Salem's one of them in our group. They're just brilliant. They're well-read. They've experienced a lot. They know stuff. They're savvy. They're always running into a wall. Everything you try and do, there's something you didn't know or planned for. Corrupt people, lies. Who planned for COVID, right? So, all these things they've had to go through and maneuver. And so I don't feel so bad when I look at their journey and figure that even the really, really smart people still have had a hell of a time just surviving.
Yeah.
So I've not beat myself up over it because it wouldn't do me any good. But I also look around with the reality that I'm in a very common place of learning.
Do you think if you would have understood accountability the way that you do now, you would have been able to avoid those really hard 5 years where you felt stuck?
I think so. Yeah, it's hard to guess back to what your mind would be like, but today where I'm at, I don't ever have that sucker punch again. I see it. And Kathy and I have a common language. Matter of fact, all of our group members have that common language. So if any one of us is in a meeting going, well, I can't do that, they go, you said I can't. I mean, really, I can't, or I won't. So I think I would have avoided all that. It certainly wouldn't have got to the level. I would have allowed myself to be transparent with somebody else and say, here's my budget. Here's what I spend every year. I mean, why should money be that secret? It's not really a secret, especially when you go bankrupt and you have to sell your house or something like that happens. Everyone's going to know. So why be so secret about it? A lot of times we don't want people in our business because we're not doing what we really know we should do. We spent all of our money on us, and then we didn't use it very well, and we were out of it. So what was the point? So now that we're back in a financial solid place, we have a giving fund that is beyond our tithe. We love to tithe to our church because it's a thank you to God for his graciousness in our lives. But we have a giving fund, and we put money in that giving fund intentionally. Every time we earn money, we put money in there. So there's always money in the giving fund. And we look at money differently now. We look at it as like a tool to bless other people and to have more fun with it. Because we're going to spend whatever we have. If I make $10 million, I'm going to spend $10 million. That's been the pattern. I don't see anything changing. But if I go spend some in savings and spend some in the giving fund and spend some in my tithe, then the rest of it I spend, I don't care because I've already put away where I need to put away. And then you can enjoy it without guilt or feeling bad that you're doing it because you've already pre-loaded up those other things that keep you from being so selfish. I think we'd see things differently if we had the idea of accountability in our lives the second time around.
When you're just talking there, I feel like you were talking a little bit about transparency, like letting other people into your life. Is that a necessary part of accountability?
Absolutely. You cannot be accountable without vulnerability. You can't, because you lie to yourself and you say, I'm going to do this. I mean, how many times have you ever said, I'm going to go on a diet? Oh, is that pizza? We lie to ourselves and we make goals that we don't tell someone about. So when we go off it, no one knows. If you really want to declare something and have the peer pressure to do it right, be public about it. Go on Facebook. I'm going off Facebook for a year. And then if you're posting next week, they're, wait, I thought you were going off Facebook for a year. We don't want to tell people because we don't want them to challenge us.
Yeah.
And so if you really, really want to be accountable, you have to be transparent with someone who will encourage you to not give up. And a lot of our friends, they only want to encourage us to stay stuck as a victim because that encourages their own victimization. If I call you out and being a victim, then I got to look at my own life. And if you say you're going to not do something, I call you out, I got to think, well, what about me? And I don't like thinking about me. That makes me uncomfortable because I know I'm not doing what I should do in a lot of cases. So yeah, vulnerability is essential for accountability. I learned that through the peer groups. Those CEOs that were in our groups over the years who rocked it, they were honest. I do not think I'll make payroll next month. I really don't know how to do it. And then we'd go, let's tell us what's going on. And we'd look and we go, well, you could do this. Oh, I didn't think about that. And we'd always find a solution, always. But the ones who didn't want to talk about it because they didn't want to look weak or that they didn't know what they were doing, they tanked. Their businesses went almost broke or did go broke. And so I've watched the two decisions. And I remember meeting with members and saying, hey, you should bring that up to the group. I don't want to do that. And then they'd keep it to themselves and it would get ugly. And then they suffered under it. But if you brought it up to the group, they could have gone, no, don't do that. But you don't want them getting in your business because you want what you want. We lie to ourselves and we think, this is a good decision. And it's not, but you don't want to not do it. Yeah. And so you just don't tell people and then you keep it and it's broken and then you suffer under it. But if you really, really want change, you got to be vulnerable.
How do you find people to be vulnerable with? Because when I was in high school, I had a big group of friends that I ran around with, and I feel like there was vulnerability and there was accountability there. But now, being 35, making friends with people is so much more difficult and hard. And if I'm trying to find a group of people that I can trust enough, where do you start? Where do you look for that?
I think
how do you do it?
You only need one to start with. And so I think there are people that if your car broke down today and you needed gas, you'd call Joe. And if your wife was in a hospital, you'd call Phil and say, will you pray for my wife? There are people you already know that love you. I think that's a starting place. They don't have to be smart. They just have to not be jerks. So when you declare, this is the plan I'm going to take, they're not the one to make you do it. One of the problems with this idea of accountability partners or accountability groups is that they do the work for you. Nobody can hold anyone accountable. You can only hold yourself accountable if you want to. So when you declare to your buddy, or you take that buddy that would have come give you gas or pray for your wife, hey, I'm struggling with this and I'm going to do this. And I just want you to ask me every week or every quarter or whatever, how's it going? Now it's up to me to do it. And I could lie to you and you'll never know. You don't need to babysit me, but I'm inviting you in to know my journey so that you can pray with me, encourage me, challenge me, but you don't have to babysit me and you don't have to correct me. And so I think that you invite one person in to start and you see the encouragement that comes from being able to say out loud to some other human, I'm struggling with this and I'm going to change it. There's power in saying that. It's like the AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. What is the first thing you do when you have the meeting? Hi, I'm Robert. I'm an alcoholic. And then they go around the room and they all declare it. Why? Because there's power in admitting that. And so if we're going to be really vulnerable and we're going to really allow people to come into our lives, we've got to say, or to be accountable, we've got to be vulnerable to do that. We've got to be able to have someone. And I think you already know people that could do that now.
Yeah. Do you think overall there's a lack of vulnerability and accountability in the culture today?
Oh, huge. Part of it's digital. We don't even hang out with people anymore.
Yeah.
Kids that are younger aren't even getting their license anymore. Why would I go anywhere? Sit in my room and talk to people. And it's just a weird time in our world. But yeah, I think there is a lack of transparency because everyone wants to look really good on social media. Nobody posts another boring day at the office. They put, hey, birthday party for Joe. And so, yeah, I think we don't have accountability in this world. Look at the level of debt. The personal debt rate is ridiculous. And look at the number of bankruptcies, look at the number of divorces, look at the problem with children who are feeling abandoned and neglected and looking for something. And sadly, those people who are then lost so much that they get caught up into all kinds of lifestyle issues that deflect them from what they could have been. So I think, yeah, there's a lack of accountability for our society. And because we're not really connected in those groups that used to help us be more accountable, like churches and civic government groups and even schools where we used to hang out and actually do stuff together, it's now just a transaction. I think we've lost that opportunity to have more accountability.
Yeah. If you're someone in your 50s or 60s and you realize that, you know what, I don't love what I'm doing. I don't love where I'm at. Maybe I've never gone and pursued my passion. Is it too late?
No. You're not done till you're done. Your life should be the best you could be at whatever stage you're at. If you're 30, then be the best at that. It would be better to live with a mistake than a regret. Because a mistake you can fix. A regret, it's too late. You're done. And so for me, the opportunity being lost is worse than I did this and it didn't work out. Okay, try another one. Try another way. Get some help. Do something about it. But to just go, I wish I would have done that. Man, that is too late.
Yeah.
Yeah, mistakes can be fixed. Regrets can't be done.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to today's episode. That was Robert Hunt, the co-author of Nobody Cares Until You Do. You can find his book on Amazon. I'll link it to the show notes, as well as a link to his CEO roundtables. Now, we release our shows every other week, so make sure to subscribe so you get notified when the next episode gets released. And if you want to make my day, head over to throughthedip.com and sign up for a newsletter. Seriously, I get this little notification every time somebody signs up, and well, it makes my day. Catch you at the next episode.